Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. This is Sophie here.
And hi, this is Daisy, and we are here to have a conversation. And I will let Sophie do the intro.
I will do the intro indeed, which I'm excited about because I feel like there's something special about introducing the episode. Sometimes it feels like some sort of art form of summarizing the thoughts in my head and summarizing everything that's happening in reality. And I think that's what I want to talk about today is how sometimes we forget that every moment is a chance to begin again. And sometimes it's really easy to start creating a story about how our life is going and how we think things are going and what certain things mean. And we blow things out of proportion and make assumptions and cast this giant cloud onto our life and assume that things will never change. What I was reflecting on yesterday is the importance of remembering that you can always start again. You don't have to bring what happened this morning into the next hour. You don't have to bring things from the past into the next day. We always have a chance to let go and to come back to our surroundings and what is right in front of us. So, to whoever is listening to this right now, I just want to take a moment to take a deep breath and just take note of what is happening in your body. How do you feel? Do you feel tense? Can you feel your heartbeat? Can you feel your feet on the ground? Can you feel your shoulders and your nose and your eyes? Are you able to take in everything that your eyes are allowing you to see? Everything in this expansive experience called life, where we have the ability to perceive and to sense and to hear and to smell and to taste, and coming back to the moment. A reminder that I think we all need because life happens, life is chaotic. There's a lot of demanding requests, there's a lot of external pressures, there's a lot happening. But we can take it back to our own control and remember that we are always able to pause and to come back to what is literally right in front of you. Pay attention to the breath because the breath is always there and it's what's actually happening. Sometimes it's easy to be 1,000 miles above the ground in our mind, in our thoughts, creating stories, creating a lot of suffering until we have that moment of, oh, right, this life is a blimp. Let me pause, collect myself, and come back and remember I don't have to take it so seriously. I can enjoy being the character. I can enjoy watching my character have all these experiences and not have to attach too heavily to them. That doesn't mean that things aren't hard, but it means that we have the choice to come back. So I'm happy to be here today and I'm happy to have you as a listener here as well, because we are all on this journey together. And it's important to remember that sometimes.
I think it's always a helpful reminder to come out of the mind and back into the moment. I think there's so many different experiences that we think can only be had in the mind, but there's so many experiences that we miss out on in the body if we're always in the mind. Because I think something that I've been thinking about recently that's interesting is that, like you said, the mind can be a million miles away, but your body is always here in the present. Your body is literally always here in this moment. And that's not to say your body might not be carrying things from past experiences, but something that I've been understanding is that we can always tap into a different type of knowing when we tap into our body and we tap out of our minds. And that has been an uncomfortable experience for me because it's almost like a new language that we have to create. Because I've gotten so comfortable intellectualizing my emotions and thinking about them. And there's a time and a place for that. And then there's a time and a place that's not for that, that's so focused on really just simplifying the feelings and feeling them. It's almost like when there's feelings to be felt, there's nothing to be said about it. There's no logic that really goes with it. It's all about the experience. So I've found that when I do come back to this moment, it feels like a major relief when I'm able to come out of the mind, when I'm able to come into my body instead and to focus on my body and to start to understand of what its experience is, because my mind will tell me a million different experiences, but the body doesn't really work like that. It's not the manager trying to fix all the problems. The body just, in my experience, it just knows things and it just knows how to feel. And the mind is what gets in the way of that. So I found that intro helpful because it allowed me to take a moment and not be caught up in my mind. So there's always a time and a place to take a break from thinking and try to find ourselves where we actually are in time and space.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about the body and how the body holds so much information. And for so much of my life, I never knew that. It wasn't until I think the past year or 2 years where I started to get in touch with my body through the healing journey of healing all these really intense emotions and starting to become aware of all the tightness and all of the tension in my body, the physical aches of just not feeling good, like my mobility not being like it once was. And it's interesting because I remember in my 20s watching that shift start to happen when I turned 25, coupled with intense experiences I was going through. I noticed a shift in my body, and COVID happened and I wasn't as active anymore. And I saw how easy it was to settle on, oh, I'm getting older. I'm 30 now. Okay, my knees kind of hurt when I run. And not recognizing that I could, or not recognizing that I was entirely disconnected from my body and that all of these emotions and experiences I've had throughout my life have been pushed down and have been living in my body because I've done a really, really good job throughout my life of pushing feelings down. Feel really intense emotion? Put great. Push it down. And that only lasted, or really that only worked for so long until I started to recognize physical ailments. My jaw, I couldn't chew food for like 6 months. My TMJ got so bad and my hips are tight and my lower back was tight. And then I started doing yoga. And when I was doing yoga, I wasn't just going to the class and checking it off my list. I was really experiencing what it feels like to slow down and to release the tension in my muscles. And as I release that tension, a lot of the times I'd get up and cry when I got home. The correlation between the tension in our bodies and our emotions, it's so interesting how we can disregard that. How we live in this vessel in our bodies is literally the vehicle in which we get through this spatial system that we're in. It's a vehicle that allows us to navigate and walk and see and just to experience reality. We do it through our body. If we didn't have a body, we would just be consciousness, I guess, but it is what gives us a physical form. And this experience also is temporary. We won't always be in this physical form. So while we are here, it's so important to take care of this vehicle, this house we live in. It's literally our house. And I don't know, I just think it's really interesting. What I've been realizing is the importance of a lot of the times when I feel frustrated or I feel uncomfortable or I feel annoyed, like you said, it's not something I can think through. I have to sit through it. I have to go for a walk or stretch or listen to a song that's going to invoke a feeling. Sometimes music is the only thing that helps me understand what I'm feeling. So I think it's a really interesting point of the difference of intellectualizing and thinking. We know certain things, especially with healing and self growth. And we can talk about all these things all we want, but ultimately, are we really embodying what it means to slow down? Are we really embodying what it means to be here, to be relaxed, to be understanding that life is passing us by as we know it? And the smallest moments are the moments that make up our entire existence. There's nowhere to get, there's nowhere we'll ever get. This is it. So, in order to better enjoy this existence, I have found that connecting to my body releases a lot of tension that allows me to feel a lot more light and allows me to enjoy life a lot more.
I just find it really interesting how my entire life I really thought the mind and the body were separate. And I'm just really seeing how nothing could be further from the truth. Like we've overinvested in the mind, I think. Or at least I've overinvested in the mind, thinking like intellect mattered the most, thinking that thinking through problems, problem solving, all mattered more than anything else. When we think about it, in reality, it's like we've created this idea that our mind is separate from our body. What has led us to believe that they are two separate entities to be studied separately when inherently our brain is what is connected to everything? And this is just my experience and my thoughts. I have no medical understanding or anything that I've studied in that matter. But the more I connect with my body, the more I realize there is such a language to be learned to but I guess it starts with we have to be able to slow down. Like I look at my life in the past decade and how there hasn't been time for me to slow down. Like I've pressured myself to go, 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 and like never allow myself to take a break really until like I'm pushed too far and am forced to. But I'm seeing how I've not had this relationship to my body. And I don't even mean in the sense of like working out, but I mean like the emotional body, like the body that stores emotions and tension and pain. And I've had different injuries throughout my life, like mild head trauma and like whiplash and these things. And it's really not until now that I'm starting to heal these things with the cranial sacral therapist. And I'm seeing how just in my few experiences that I've had, our entire system is entirely connected and our body is a healing vessel. And whenever there's an incident, trauma, or intensity that happens in our life, like our body tenses up and it remembers those experiences. And it's harder for the body to regulate when our body is so out of whack, when it's so used to being unaligned. And again, like this is all just like from my perspective, and there's no like medical components to this that may be valid. There might be, but this is just like my understanding of connecting to the body because it doesn't have to always be this scientific thing. Like we have an emotional connection to our body that we just may not be able to explain verbally or vocally, but we're able to start to help ourselves relax when we're able to talk to our body. And this is all something that's very new for me. So I find it interesting to talk about because it's not really something that you can talk about. Because the thing is, like, the mind and the body are connected, but they communicate totally differently. Like, you can't really always put a word to what you're feeling. All you can do is experience that feeling and connect the dots of understanding why maybe that feeling is there in your body. And yeah, I think that it's really crazy that I've spent my whole life just not paying attention to this. But I guess that's part of the journey of healing. And healing yourself is you got to look at your body because our body is what we live within. So of course there's going to be stuff stored in our body that is directly impacted by the emotions that we haven't processed.
When you were referencing, like, the caveat of we're not medical professionals, which we're not, but was making me think about how I've had so many experiences in the medical field where doctors just did not address that maybe this was a matter of tension. Maybe this was a matter of stress. Oh, instead, let's put you on this antibiotic or let's put you on this medication. And again, I'm not giving any sort of recommendations or advice for medicine or medical needs, but rather just reflecting on the different experiences as I've explored more Eastern philosophies and understanding and the tradition of yoga and going back to Buddhism and Hinduism and acupuncture. Acupuncture is something I got into 2 years ago, and it's tremendously helped me release tension. My mom, who's in her 60s, recently got into acupuncture too, and it's helped her asthma, it's helped her anxiety. So, what I find just so fascinating is really the approach that we take as a society to let's give you medicine, let's just give you something that will fix this or whatever without addressing the root cause. what is the root of it? And I've seen this with my mom, for example, like she's taken a lot of medications throughout her life and getting to the point now where she's like, I never really thought about what is the root cause. Am I taking care of this body? So, really, I think I've been amazed by watching this transformation of starting out from a teenager into my 20s of my body is a place of how do I look? How do I look? How does my body being presented to the outer world in a way that will get me some sort of validation or that's linked to my value? And then getting a little older and going, "Oh wait, I actually can't chew my food right now. This is serious. Like, what else could happen if I don't start addressing this?" And then seeing how I've been able to heal myself by doing simple massages on YouTube. Like, the resources are there and available, but I think sometimes, like for me, I just had a lot of anxiety that I couldn't slow down to take the time to sit with my body and to understand. And one thing I want to say too, when you're talking about the medical world and whatever, it's like we know a lot. We are the only ones with our bodies 24/7. And I think a lot of times we forget that and we don't take the chance to find out, oh, when you spend enough time stretching and doing yoga and with your body and meditating and sitting in the experience of being in your body, I have started to understand how movements work and how it's all connected. And it's like, of course, we're able to understand our own body. It's the vehicle we're functioning in. So I think there's almost been this narrative by the complications of the medical field. And again, I think the human body is entirely complex, but on the other side of that, some things feel so simple that, oh, a doctor's gonna say, get surgery on your jaw, was the first thing I was told. You should get surgery on that to fix it. Only for me to find out, oh, the jaw is like one of the biggest muscles in my body. I didn't even know that. I wonder, like, thinking about school, like, is this something where we learn? Like, anatomy? I don't remember much. I think we spent a lot of time learning about, like, World War I and World War II and math. I don't remember having an anatomy class, maybe like a health class about puberty.
I had an anatomy class in high school, but it was very focused on like memorizing and properly being able to locate organs on a dead cat. That's what we did. In anatomy, that was our final test. We had to locate different organs within the dead animal. I don't know if it was a cat. It may have been a pig. I'm not really sure. It was something, but yeah, I catch your drift when it comes to like having to go to someone else to like it's almost like so it's like on one hand, the body is this like ultra complex thing where, yeah, people study it for years, years on years and years, because there's some things that you need someone who has a deep understanding of the different complexities of the different systems. And of course, you got to go to someone for that. But it feels like so many of the ailments I've had in my life were out of like just not taking care of myself and not really knowing how to take care of myself. And self care has such a bad lingo to it. It's like something that you buy, but reality, like there's so many cultures that have self care woven into them. And I feel like it's maybe a trend now in the US, or it's become something that's been more normalized of, okay, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to stretch for 5 minutes in the middle of my workday, or I'm going to go home and I'm going to take a bath, or, you know, these different methods that haven't really been woven into how we were brought up. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't doing these things when I was like 5, 10, 15 years old. I certainly wasn't doing these things in high school. But it just makes me wonder like about like the gap between understanding our own bodies. And oftentimes, you know, we don't know anything. And we go to the doctor and we assume they know everything. And there's like this kind of like divide because no one can really know our bodies like we do. But we kind of think that we don't know our bodies because it's kind of what we're taught. Go to the doctor, you know? But there's just so many different complexities to it. There's like, oh, I broke my arm. You know what I mean? There's so many different components to it. But it's like, how can we know our bodies more? How can I be more connected to my body and more empowered with my body? Because you see this kind of information all the time where people don't get the right diagnosis from a doctor, or they spend many years suffering in pain from something that they can't figure out what it is. But ultimately, like they figure it out on their own and they start healing. And I'm definitely judging myself talking about this because I'm like, who the hell are you to talk about this? I'm like, I don't want to spread like misinformation, but I guess it's just my opinion. But I'm like, also like, who am I to have an opinion on this information? But I guess my personal experience, I feel like the first time I felt like really personally rejected by the medical system was when I got a concussion when I was in high school. And I think I was like a sophomore and it was like a minor concussion. But I went to the neurologist and he was really serious. And neurologists, they deal with like the worst of the worst. But he was seeing me for a minor concussion. And he was like, you can't do anything. All you can do is stare at a wall. Like, don't be on your phone. Don't like overdo it because you don't want to slide back down and get worse. So like this caused me a lot of anxiety and I thought the only way to get better was to do nothing and to do that in a really extreme sense, but this is really where I started to see like a lot of anxiety and depression, a lot of things come up for me because I didn't know how to manage the fact that I had to stop my life as a 16-year-old trying to achieve all these things. And I really had a problem with that. And I saw like a big lapse in like the medical system from my experience having the concussion and like not having the emotional support just by going to the doctor. I didn't have that emotional support. And I think that's what caused most of the problems because that really gets in the way of like the healing process. So I saw like the emotional component as siloed from the physical component. And we know that's just not true. And there's just a lapse with connecting those two things. And I mean, I'm sure that's why I've reached out to all these different types of healers and I've seen such big impact because so many ailments in my experience have came from emotions that have not been properly supported or properly processed if they weren't supported at the time that it was happening. And it just makes me realize so many ailments come from emotions that we haven't processed. And that's where I just see this huge divide and that I felt personally failed by. And I think it's just an important thing to talk about because it's like our emotions directly impact our physical state. We can have lower back pain because of emotions stored in our body. And I think like that's much more of a common understanding these days. But like when I was 16, like I had no idea about any of this. And I suffered a lot because there was no indicator to take care of your emotions like when you go to the neurologist. There was no recommendation to go to a therapist. That's just my experience. And that was a really real experience for me.
It's interesting as I've gotten, I was going to say older, but I think the key is probably also cultivating awareness and being more mindful and having a sense of, okay, I've been told all of these things throughout my life, but have I done my own research? Have I done my own, when I say research, I think when you go online and you try to find things, like there's so many different sources of information, and sometimes it can be really confusing. That's why recently ChatGPT is really helpful because they can pull from a bunch of different articles and it can help you better understand where this is coming from, what is the source, what is the citing. But what I was trying to say is really, it comes to a point where you realize, like Daisy, your experience with the concussion, that when you're younger and going through experiences, you don't really know how to handle them. And sometimes that lack of understanding is overwhelming, and we grow up and we never take the time to figure out, okay, I need to figure this out for myself because my parents don't have the answers. And I think that was a really eye opening experience for me as I've been evolving, is just realizing I'm learning a lot more than my parents knew at the time that they were raising me. And I think that's a natural progression of evolution and generational advancements, and honestly, consciousness expansion, like our consciousness as a whole expanding and becoming more aware and becoming more mindful, where we are able better to understand all of this. So the point I'm trying to make is the importance of doing your own research on your own body and spending time with yourself to understand, and by slowing down and everything we talk about on this podcast, taking the time to relax, and how that will help us find out for ourselves. Because a lot of the times, like, there are answers that we will find out that other people may not have directed us to. And if we don't take it upon ourselves and take the initiative and put in the time, instead of scrolling on TikTok for 5 hours, putting in the time to, okay, am I taking care of this body? And Daisy, I was going to ask you to maybe expand more on your experience that you had today, the cranial experience. And I think that could be helpful to explain to the listeners of what it was like to have that experience, a more somatic therapeutic approach.
Yeah, it's something that I find really interesting because it's so simple. The way that she described it was she said that she used to be a veterinarian and she worked with horses. And horses weigh a lot and you can't just push them, get them to go places. Like you have to get them to trust you and you lead and they follow. And she was like, that lead and following is really what cranial sacral therapy is. It's like little manipulation of, like, it's really like the neck and the head, but it's basically very micro movements. It's manipulation of the fascia. So, like the different connective tissues. So, that can be like a bone or tissue. There's various different types. But a lot of the times, like for me, like I had minor head trauma, I had whiplash. So, these are really intense experiences that caused my body to compress. And since they were high stress, I think that probably impacted my ability to be within like a baseline. Like my natural baseline kind of shifted from that. And from that, there's probably different things that come up that impact me. So the work of cranial sacral therapy is one that helps to correct the body to its natural homeostasis. And something that she was explaining was when our bodies are super out of alignment from these different traumas that have happened to us, either physical or emotional, that change the nature of the body has a hard time regulating. And she made it clear, she's like, the body is meant to get dysregulated and then to regulate. And when it's just out of alignment from these experiences, it's really hard for the body to regulate. So it's easier for the body to stay in like this dysregulation. And that's something I resonate with. I feel like I've always dealt with an overwhelm, but like after these experiences, I kind of just pushed them away. But like I really struggled with a lot of overwhelm. And the experience I had today was like a searing pain in the back of my head. It was like an intense pain. Like I guess it was kind of like a migraine maybe, when she was working with my neck and just lightly touching it. And she was asking me questions, to think about, like, what does this bring up? What emotions are getting brought up from this? And it took me back to that time of when I was in high school and I was thinking about it. It's kind of like a therapy, but they're really just guiding you. And that was such an crazy experience for me because it really brought things out, like those feelings I haven't felt in years, where I really don't know what was happening. And I assume it's like my body aligning back to how it was before these experiences, like past head trauma. Because that's where my head trauma was. It was the back of my head. And these are the things that I don't know, but it feels really empowering to have this connection to my body to where it is getting resurfaced maybe, because there's physical things that you just feel. And I've only done 2 sessions, but I've known about cranial sacral therapy for decades. Not decades. I'm only 28, for like a decade. I've heard about it. And I've heard amazing things from it because it's such a low threshold. Like there's really hardly any touch being done on you. But I have like an emotional release, and that's not always like the case. But what I've found is, there's all different types of pain in our body that can be connected to emotional pain. And it's so complicated, but like the body knows. And in a lot of ways, it was a very regulating experience to where I feel really calm. And a lot of the times I feel really calm mentally, but my body feels really dysregulated and it's hard to regulate. And I'm curious to see how this journey goes of continuously working with this therapist to work through these ailments that have happened to my body, to see what will come of this. And I mean, having 2 sessions already, it's been really eye-opening just to connecting with the body, because we can do all we want in the mind, but ultimately our body is what is carrying us. And we have to learn to listen to it. And sometimes we can't listen to it from the brain. So that's why I find this practice so helpful, because there's just something happening where it's hard to explain what it is, but it feels like it brings things up that you can't really communicate, or I've not been able to communicate, but it's more so of like a processing of physical pain, I guess.
It's so interesting when you think about all the experiences we've been through and how our bodies were always there with us. Like, it's not like our bodies went elsewhere, they were there when you were going through that really intense experience or your first day of work, nervous, anxious. Think about how much emotion accumulates within our body. And yeah, I've been fascinated about learning about the nervous system and our body and understanding things like how humming, when I do a humming meditation, how that automatically I go into rest and digest. And I'm so much more relaxed. And it feels like this healing journey. I say healing because I think I've been healing active trauma and experiences over the past few years. But from a daily maintenance standpoint, it's care. It is self care. It's self love and learning how to get to know our bodies and just being amazed by how throughout this journey of healing, how being in touch with my body has been pivotal in releasing and letting go and being able to surrender so that no matter what has happened to me or no matter what I've been through, we don't have to be stuck with all the emotions that are stored within us. We can feel them and release them. So, I think this is a really interesting topic and something I've been exploring in my life a lot. Yoga is a daily practice for me now. And one thing I do want to say, like, I've had to work through a lot of fear with doing yoga. It felt like a burden. It felt frustrating. I don't know how to do this. And the more that I do it, the more that it's just a part of my day now. It's something I look forward to. I love it so much. I love connecting to my body. I love spending the time to stretch and to work out and to move. And so if you're somebody who feels like you feel maybe a little intimidated by yoga or don't know if you can, for me, finding a yoga studio where I live that was more mindful and grounded was really, really helpful for me to have a safe space to learn because I think so much of this is really integration into trying something new and getting to know and finding the right spot. But there are so many people out there that want to cultivate that space for you and who are healing practitioners. And it's really beautiful to know that there's people in the world who that is their full-time job and they're passionate about helping other people connect with their bodies. So I encourage who's ever listening to this to take time to check in and remember that stretching and massage and acupuncture and all of these different modalities, obviously, certain ones will work better for others. And by no means am I giving any sort of medical advice, but they can work wonders. So we don't have to live in pain no matter what age we are. And the more we increase our mobility, the more we can continue to release all of this energy that is stored within us. Because ultimately, everything in this human experience is just energy, right? So, of course, we need to find ways to work with that energy.
Yeah, I think if anything, it's just important to spread awareness of different alternative modalities. Not that these things aren't like commonplace these days, but it is always good to just bring it up because it's always good to just spread awareness on these things that have helped us. And it would be really cool to have people on, whether it's acupuncture, cranial sacral therapy, massage therapist, yoga instructors, because this is such an integral part of healing. And it's been such an important part for me because there's so much you can do with training your mind. There's so much you can do with that. But it comes to a point where it doesn't even help to talk about those things if you aren't directly working with the body, if you aren't directly healing the body. And a lot of the times the body heals itself. A lot of the times it does. We have to allow ourselves to slow down or work with the right practitioners. But I think it's just so important to say that because it's so validating for me because I felt like when I was going through all of this stuff with these ailments that I was experiencing, I would try to think my way out of it. I would try to fix these problems. And we will drive ourselves into a wall if we don't pay attention to our bodies, because there's only so much our minds can do. There's so much that our bodies can do to heal us. And we have to give our bodies the floor. We have to give them the spotlight. We have to treat them with care. We have to be able to recognize that these experiences are real, and we have to have the correct people that can help us heal our bodies, or the correct practices that are right for us. Like, my idea of what yoga was until we found this specific yoga studio was that it was a place I pushed myself, when in reality, my experience with yoga that's been transformative is one in which I hardly move. I go very slow. And I think it's just important to keep trying things. It's easy to give up. It's easy to get frustrated and to write something off because it wasn't making the impact that you thought it would. But maybe there's just a different practice that, or a different practitioner that will be the right fit. It's just more so to not give up and to not stop trying, because you deserve to find the right practice or practitioner to help cultivate that space so that your body can decompress and correct itself, basically. And it can be a long journey and a long process. And just to not judge ourselves with that, because when we're going to find the time to heal and to connect with ourselves, it's going to be the time that we're able to do that, that it's safe to do that. So it's just an important thing to touch on, the importance of the body. It can't all be solved by the mind. That's something that I've had to learn the hard way. But I found this conversation interesting. I think that I definitely had a lot of hesitation to talk about the medical field. And I think this is a common thing. It's like, oh, you're not a doctor, you can't talk about this. But I've had my experiences. I've had my own experiences, and I think that is something that is shared amongst people. And sometimes just hearing those experiences, I think, can be validating and can be a reminder to trust yourself and to trust your body, because no one knows your body like you do. And if something doesn't feel right, you know that. And to keep searching until you find the thing that is going to help you heal and help you feel more comfortable in your body and more safe. So, we haven't talked about anything like this before. So, I appreciate our listeners. I appreciate you listening and tuning in. I hope that if you had any experience with any sort of ailment, that this conversation was validating or encouraging to further seek out different modalities that can help you on your journey, or just listen to your body ultimately, no matter what anyone else may say. So, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next episode.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope that your body is on the healing journey, because ours are for sure. And it's cool to be able to talk about the physical experience, because who knows yourself better than you? It always comes back to us. So thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you being here, and we will talk to you soon.